So welcome everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to the WHTL Race and Ethnicity webinar. I am Tea Colajanni. I'm the founder and chair of WIHTL, which stands for Women in Hospitality, Travel and Leisure. We are a collaboration community. Our mission is to help companies across hospitality, travel and leisure create diverse and inclusive workplaces where women and people from ethnic minorities can thrive and reach the most senior level of leadership if that's what they wish to do. Today, I am joined by an impressive panel of speakers that I will introduce in turn. You can see their names on the screen, but we'll just go around the house. Sandra Kerr, Race Equality Director from Business in the Community. Welcome, Sandra. Patrice Mantey, Head of Joint Ventures and Commercial Planning at Virgin Atlantic. Welcome. Dare Ilori, Group Head of Sustainability at Merlin Entertainments. Welcome, Dare. And Hannah Tengnah, a Legal Counsel at McDonald's Restaurants. Welcome, Hannah. Welcome to all of you, and welcome to all of you who are joining our webinar. I can see numbers are still going up, so welcome to all of you. Before we get started, just a few words of introduction from me. A few weeks ago, we got together and we agreed the content of this webinar. And at the time, we decided to explore the impact of COVID-19 on people from ethnic minorities groups. Since then, the events in Minneapolis and across the US, all the demonstrations that have swept America, the UK, and globally, condemning the killing of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer, have seen corporations and individuals make a public stance in support of the Black community. Leaders are acknowledging that something needs to be done. Today, with the help, insight and experience of our panelists, we aim to offer some practical steps and tangible examples of what companies and individuals across hospitality, travel and leisure can do to raise awareness, to educate themselves and others, and to take action to deal with what has been described as a second pandemic after COVID-19. So in terms of the flow of the webinar, we'll have each one of the speakers share their reflections and considerations. And then we'll open up to questions from the audience, so from all of you who have joined us. We'll aim to do this as interactive and engaging as possible. So please type your questions and comments in the chat, and we will make sure that our panel answers your questions or provides their perspective on your points. So without further ado, we'll get started. Sandra, we'll start with you, and you can share your screen with your presentation.
I'm going to get support with that screen because someone's going to help me with the poll when that time comes. Is that right?
Yes, we will. We will. Yes, I will do the poll. If you do the presentation, if you can share on your screen your presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Share. Okay.
Excellent.
So far, so good. Let's see. Let's get this in presentation mode.
Fabulous.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the kind invitation, Taya. Strange times, and when Taya and I had a conversation about this, we were just thinking, COVID-19 was enough, and now she's always mentioned the disruptions, and because of what we've seen happen to George Floyd in the US and the UK. So I'm going to touch on just action for employers around COVID-19 that we've been sharing with them, and also what I've been sharing with employers and plan to share with employers what to do in the current climate. So the first thing I always do is set out the case for change. Why are we even talking about this? Why were we talking about this before the pandemic? The McGregor-Smith review, this is worth 24 billion to the UK now to tackle the disparities, to the UK economy. And then when you think about what COVID-19 is set to do. So therefore, actually being inclusive, getting all, you know, the BAME people into work and at the right levels within organizations, it's worth an economic boost for all of us to benefit from. So really, really more important. And then we know through McKinsey review that when they reviewed more than 1,000 organizations, that actually those who had more diversity at that top table had 33% better financial returns. And then this is well documented data, 1 in 8 of the UK population are from a BAME background, but 1 in 10 are in the workplace. And this is a kind of persistent disparity that has existed. And then when we look at the pyramid, what looks at, you know, the new generation coming through, 1 in 4 children in primary school education are from an ethnic minority background. So that's the talent pipeline. And actually, when you think about the strange times they're going to be entering to, because we're dealing with, you know, we're still to see what's going on with the impacts of COVID-19. And then you look at the top table, it's only 1 in 16. So we really want to kind of square that pyramid. The next area I want to focus on briefly is the Race at Work Charter. So the data that we've used to establish this was from a YouGov report, a collaboration, a survey we did in collaboration with YouGov. We ran it first in 2015, again in 2018. And areas where we saw there had been no change were the areas that we set up and said needed action from employers. And we picked also areas that we feel that would help to take down some of the structural barriers that are in the workplace around ethnicity and race. So leadership, only 1 in 3 said that there was a leader at the top table who's committed to equality. So that is really needed to ensure that conversation gets to the top table. Data, so the importance of actually being evidence driven. So if we didn't have data, we wouldn't even know the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on BAME communities. And I had spoken to the ONS and asked them to publish that data, to monitor it, and let's see what that looks like. The third area is about committing, ensuring that there's no bullying harassment in your organizations. And if you have frontline people, which obviously many of you will, people who interact with customers, it's important to protect that area as well, because what the survey showed us is that there'd been an increase in incidences with customers and clients. And then the fourth commitment really was about employers and managers being part of that solution, because obviously sometimes they are invariably the ones closest to talent inside organizations and really need them to engage. And the fifth priority, but really important one, is progression, strong desire to progress within ethnic minority groups. We found this in the 2015 survey, 2018 survey, and in prior surveys that we conducted in 2010 and 2011. So we know this is a consistent theme around progression. And I always say that, you know, if you look at, we ask YouGov to also look at educational qualifications. BAME people are more likely to have high education qualifications. So you can see where if you are told get education, then you'll get progressed, and it doesn't happen, that's where that drive comes from, and that desire to feel like I need to do more, I can do more. And also there's a strong appetite for fast track in those communities as well. So hopefully someone's going to help me with a poll here. So poll question for you to answer. Has your organization signed up for the Race at Work Charter? This is a yes, no, and I don't know. And I understand, oh, here's a poll ready. So can you please respond and submit your answer so I can see who's in the room, virtual room, but let's see.
60% of people have voted, so we're just, the numbers are going up very, very quickly.
Okay, fabulous.
I will share the results as soon as we have completed voting. We're nearly there at 83%.
No one gets to sit this out, people. It is tracking, so please press something. Even if it's I don't know, that's okay.
I think there could be a couple of people that have joined via phone, and so they are not able to.
Okay, so shall we have a look then if we've got
to vote? So we've got 85%. So we're going to close the poll now and share the results.
So this, so I always say, you know, fresh blood. I'm always excited when I see lots of people haven't signed or say no, because I know there's a great opportunity to encourage you to sign. So thank you very much. If you can close the poll so I can go to my next slide. that's really, I'm going to tell you some things. So one of the things we're really encouraging, so one of the benefits of signing is we encourage people to find, a leader at the top table who's prepared to talk to these issues. And one of the things we've been saying to our employers at the moment, when you're doing furloughs and future looking at downsizing, really monitor who goes on to furlough to ensure that you don't end up having a disproportionate, for example, and I use ethnicity, but it would be the same for gender. So for example, if you have 10% BAME people in your workforce, you wouldn't expect to have 25% or 50% of them on furlough or earmarked for redundancy. So really encouraging employers to think about that, because otherwise all the progress that you're making on those things will be lost. So really encouraging employers, and I've done 2 fact sheets specifically, one looking at economic impact and talks a bit more about this and with actions for policymakers and employers, and another one looking at mental health and the impacts of COVID-19. And then the other area that we're asking employers to think about is where you can redeploy people into different roles. Because sometimes, because of the way the organization is set out, there's this occupational segregation within an organization that if you just cut, you think, oh, finances, and just cut everything based on purely looking at finances, you could disproportionately end up letting go a lot of your BAME staff or women without planning to. So really encourage you to look at that. And then the current climate. So, look, nobody could foresee what was going to happen. We saw it with our own eyes, and it has, caused just protests and people saying no, no, no around the world. When I was asked what do I think needs to happen, the 3 areas that I believe action is needed, one is leadership. And I say that, look, if Donald Trump, for example, had Black leaders around him who listened to and valued their contributions, they would have told him at the beginning, you need to pick up those police officers. We've had a line of killings of Black people. We can't have any more, and potentially advised him quickly. That would have potentially, diffused some of what we have seen. And then in the UK, when you think about Windrush and the Windrush scandal, again, had there been Black people around their senior policy-making tables, they would have said, look, you're overlooking this group. You need to, they're not in that group, and potentially alert them to that. So employers really and leaders need to find a way, particularly when they're making decisions that are going to directly impact BAME people, Black people, to find a way to consult, listen, and then act. The second area is allies. So we can't just have Black people or Asian people talking about this issue. We need everybody talking about it. So we need white voices to speak up and look at influence and action that they can take. And then we're encouraging employers to engage with their employee networks. What many employers are doing at this time is starting that conversation, just checking in, how are you? And then giving people the space to talk about what has happened and what the impact and how they're feeling about the workplace. So we have employers who have told me 800 people have turned up for those calls, 500 people. And, the what next obviously is always that next question. And I always say, listen first to what you're hearing and then start to act. So we have a webinar. So there are blogs, I've put a statement out, a blog, I've put the timeline. Amanda and I and Richard Affronta, our chair, we wrote to all of the BITC organizations who hadn't already signed, telling them to sign now, and also asking those who have signed to engage their suppliers and tell them to sign. And then we have a webinar coming up on next Thursday where we'll hear from some employers talking about what they're doing and encourage employers to take action. That is free. It's on the BITC website. Please feel free to register and listen in. And then finally, as a call to action, really, is about the Race at Work Charter. It is open. We're encouraging employers. This is the time to sign. Since Monday, we have, I think, 17 employers who've come saying, can you sign up now, please? So this is a good time to sign. We have free materials, so a fact sheet for a sponsor or a leader at the top table who wants to be that, leader role. There is a fact sheet of top tips that can help them get started. And then obviously the survey, we extended it to the end of July because of COVID-19, encouraging employers to participate in that because we will be lifting up the responses to that. And obviously if you sign, you get a lot of free materials. So the good thing about this slide and what I've said is everything is free and there are no tricks. This is about resource that will help you. And I just want to encourage you that the benefit of having someone at the top table is that you've got a clear channel to feed some of this insight to feed some of the calls to action to. So employers who have signed are finding it easier to get messages to the top table. So I'm going to leave it there because I know I'm not the only speaker, and I hope I haven't overrun. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sandra. If you stop sharing your screen, we can all come back on excellent. And we'll move on to Patrice from Virgin Atlantic. Over to you, Patrice.
Thank you, Tia. Thank you, Sandra. That was a great tee up. So thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. I guess my introduction into diversity in the workplace was really a few years ago when Virgin Atlantic's ex-CEO Craig Krieger wanted to understand the experience of someone who was quite unlike him. So he specifically sought out someone in the organization who would be willing to be honest and transparent about their experience so that he could learn a little bit more about someone who was unlike him. And that was really the start of the reverse mentoring program, which was actually aided by Hayley at the ITC to help us get that program off the ground. And since then, you know, Virgin has been on a journey to kind of improve and increase the diversity and inclusion within the workplace. Just touching on what Sandra just said, you know, across the UK economy, the kind of BAME network can contribute to over £24 billion. And that's just in the UK. I mean, I come from a finance background, so I love a business case. So if this is not a really strong business case, I'm not sure what is. You know, the McKinsey report specifically highlighted the fact that if you had more senior BAME individuals around the executive table, you can increase your profits by up to 33%. So actually those profits in those companies were 33% higher than those where the executive boards were had BAME individuals which were underrepresented. So I think the business case is pretty clear. I mean, we're in the middle of a global pandemic in both of terms of virus and racial, and this is having a massive financial impact on the world. So just again, touching on what Sandra said, if there is one time for you to kind of double down on your diversity and inclusion practices, not just your policies, but enacting them, now would actually be the time. And there is a plethora of information out there from academia, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, etc., which will give you additional resources and business cases if you need that to kind of push the agenda in your organization. During this time, not only are BAME individuals disproportionately affected, but actually within the workplace, it's very common for D&I initiatives and all kind of training initiatives to be cut during this time. And again, this is the time when actually you will find that those industries and those organizations who double down on D&I during this time are going to be the ones who are more successful in the future. So just really a call out to all the organizations who are kind of on board and on this call to think about the impact of kind of cutting that training and then specifically diversity and inclusion during this time. Just focusing on, you know, travel and leisure, which is, you know, why you kind of set up this network. You know, I have over the past few weeks particularly made sure that I was well versed and well researched on the facts and stats that are out there. And I came across a really interesting study by PwC from last year, which focused specifically on diversity in the travel and leisure industry. So I will share that with Joanna at the end, and she can send a link out to everyone. But essentially, PwC looked across a range of businesses, but this report specifically was for the travel industry. They looked at a business's diversity and inclusion strategy, leadership and the tone at the top, what those HR processes and policies were, and then whether there were other inclusion and diversity initiatives. When they looked at this across each of the businesses, there were 50 companies, I think, that were involved. They ranked them across 4 categories. So were the efforts simplistic? Were they well defined? Were they advanced in their approach, or were they leading? Across those 50 companies, they found the average was 60, and that falls into between the simplistic and the defined criteria, so actually at the lower end of the pool. The actual average for all other industries was over 70%. And for me, that was where I thought, actually, we do have a bit of an issue in hospitality and leisure specifically. And I think the irony was not lost on me that an industry which promotes individuals to kind of go and explore different cultures and kind of be a bit brave and step out of their comfort zone actually has a lower impact level when it comes to diversity and inclusion than other industries. So some of the findings that they have in that paper kind of allude to the fact that you must double down. You must not only have the policy, because actually a lot of the research showed that they had really strong policies, but it was actually enacting those policies and ensuring that the leadership tone from the top reflected those policies. And I think across most organisations, we're not short of a diversity and inclusion policy, but are businesses actually following through and supporting those D&I initiatives to make sure it's not just a piece of paper, but it's actually being enacted on. So where they found the most success was where you had the D&I strategy, but you also had a corporate strategy, which was really closely aligned with one another. And that's kind of the tenets of what they view as success. And I think, you know, touching on the Race at Work Charter, it's kind of follows that. You've got the tone at the top, which is the executive sponsor. You've got the data to support that, and you're making sure that actually throughout you have the equality agenda firmly intertwined with the corporate agenda as well. I would also say, you know, obviously myself and my friends have been having conversations post the really traumatic event in the US a few weeks ago. And for some of us, you know, the topic will elicit some really deep emotions. And I think touching on what Sandra said, now is the time for leaders to actually listen. You know, massive shout out to all those organisations that are actually putting in the time and effort, especially as people are furloughed, to set up some listening calls to really understand how their people are feeling right now. But I would say, you know, to those organisations, just ensuring that call out is genuine, because, you know, I've had several conversations where people have kind of said, you know, I'm not sure why they're even asking, because they never listen to us anyway. And that is not just about race, but that's just in general. So there is, at this time, you know, especially during COVID and, you know, redundancies and reorganisations, companies really have to double down in terms of their culture, making sure they're honest and transparent in their communications, but also when they ask questions, be really clear about why you're asking. What is your intent? Because for some people, when you ask that question and people kind of divulge their stories or what they believe could change or would change, if those voices are then left unheard, it's actually going to cause more damage to the organisation, the culture, and potentially the individual if corrective action, or at least not acknowledgement of that experience, or, you know, that transparency is not adhered to. So, you know, I've also been talking to my friends about, okay, so what, now what are we going to do about it? You know, this has happened, it's been really unfortunate. It's not, unfortunately in the US, it's more of an everyday occurrence, which doesn't make it easier. And it has been, you know, pretty traumatic for us to see in this day and age. And the key is for us to use our anger, our guided anger, and really drive some positive action now. So I'm really hoping that this event will be a catalyst to change, and more organisations now and society as a whole can't ignore what's actually happened. So it's a case of now we know better and things are a little bit more transparent. We all have a kind of a call out and a necessity and a need that we should all do a bit better as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Patrice. Thank you for sharing your reflections with us. I'll move on to Dare now. As a reminder, Dare is the group head of sustainability at Merlin Entertainments. You need to unmute yourself, Dare, and share your screen so we can see your presentation.
Thank you. Is my screen showing, please?
No, not yet.
Not yet? Okay.
No.
Share screen. Okay. Just give me a minute, please. I don't know why this is not coming up as planned.
So if you prefer, we can, Joe, you've got that as presentation.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
Okay. Excellent. So you need to do slideshow and then.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Tara, and I would like to welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I would like to just corroborate what Sandra and Patrice have already said about the issue around race. I would do a dishonor if I go on with this talk without referring to George Floyd. I think it's a topical issue now, and it's actually awakened the world to some reality. But I just want to say that in the world we live today, we have to be very careful so that we don't drift into black versus white mentality or narrative. I believe that what we have, it's about humanity versus racism. And the reason why I adopt this line is because that is the truth. And also, just to give an example in context, if we have a terrorist blow down an aeroplane, and it's an unfortunate incident that's happened in the past, and the terrorists aligned themselves to a particular religion. From my experience, the world does not go, oh, it's the world versus the religion they've aligned themselves to. The world goes, it's the world versus terrorists. And this is why it's important that we don't go through the path, which is dangerous, of white versus black. So, in this, I want to share my personal experience in the corporate organization, and I will put it in 3 categories. The first one is what I believe the employees should be aware of and should learn from, and also execute actions on. The first thing is culture. We have several cultures that comes with inclusion, with diversity. And it's important that companies recognize these different cultures and they are able to actually apply this into the business culture. Any business culture that actually discourages the BAME culture needs probably to be reviewed, and because that's the beauty of diversity. It's also important that the people from the BAME community are taken through necessary trainings, because if the company have some values, and these are probably different to the values we are used to, especially before coming to the Western world, it is important that the companies are fully aware of these and help the BAME community to develop through necessary courses and training. Now, the second thing for companies is that it's important that we're able to pronounce names of people from the BAME community very well and correctly. I've had experience of where people from BAME community have been asked if their surname can be shortened. And I wonder if that would be accepted if a non-BAME person is asked to shorten his or her surname. And the point is, people asking these questions don't understand, and that is where education is vital. So on the screen, for those of us that can see it, the surname on the screen, the person's name is Sarah, and the surname, for an average person, they're most likely going to pronounce it wrongly. And I bet if you're not a Nigerian, you're not likely to be able to pronounce this surname. So instead of pronouncing it wrongly and call it along or allonge, and then actually insulting the person by not pronouncing the surname very well, it's better to ask, Sarah, How do you pronounce your surname? Which should be pronounced Alonge. And so these things are very vital and important. Also for companies, it's important that we consider what I call BAME into leadership. Companies need to invest in initiatives, and this is similar to what we've done, companies have done for women in leadership. Companies need to identify opportunities to develop BAME employees and get them to leadership positions so that they can stand as role models for other BAME that want to either work for the company or that are already in the company. And this is an opportunity because it means people can go. If that person can be in the exec, that means I can reach the top of my career in this organization. If that person can be a director as a BAME member, then the sky is the beginning for me. So I think this is vital. And also, this is about microaggressions. And to be honest, from my experience, sometimes people from non-BAME community do not know that it's actually a racial microaggressions. When you keep saying, actually you are not like other Blacks, or you speak good English, or actually I have a different impression. And I mean, things like that we need to be aware of. And people that don't even have racial or racist intention can fall into this pit without knowing. And that's the beauty of education. So we all just need to continue to listen, learn, and act. So, knowledge is not power. In my opinion, knowledge is a potential power. The power in knowledge is when it is executed. So when companies listen, when they learn, they must actually execute policies that will make a change. It's not just important to say, oh, we're ready now, we're signing up to the charter. No. This is what it actually means for us. It must be different to just a pen on a paper. It must be real for the member of the BAME community. They must be able to feel it. Now, I also want to go into my personal experience again as a BAME and what I have done to progress my career. And I am not saying this is one size fits all, but this is my personal experience. Now, knowledge is power, but again, if it's not executed, it's just a potential power. So as a member of the BAME community, I've always taken time to learn, to develop myself, training opportunities. I always find it, speak to my manager, can I go on this training? This is what it would do for the company. This is why it is important. This is what it would do for me. And I have always used that opportunity, and I've always executed the knowledge I acquired. I have always listened to feedback as a member of the BAME community. It's important because sometimes feedback, in fact, the truth is, for someone to give you feedback is because they care about you, in most cases. Because if they don't, they probably will just not talk about it. Because feedback will help us to develop, and I call them gifts. The third thing that I have done is I ensured at every position of my career progression, I found a mentor. I took this initiative myself, and I found a mentor. The purpose of mentor cannot be overemphasized. They will help a lot because my personal experience have shown to me that where I am today, I would not be here without a mentor, giving me the right feedback to develop myself. We don't know what we don't know. And that's the beauty of having a mentor sometimes, as well as getting regular feedback. And finally, I want to say it is a myth, and I'm not going to say this lightly, to say that all whites are racist, or that blacks or that whites don't like blacks, or that it's about black versus white. The reason why I'm mentioning this is, in my career, I have had people come to me and say, these people, they don't like us. And I go, how do you come to that conclusion? Now, the power of your mind will determine where you will get to. And that's the point about the fact that we cannot let that dangerous narrative control our life or our career. I always say to people, history is good, but people that live in the past, they're actually missing the opportunity of the present. Finally, I just want us to know that we only have one race, the human race. For all of us, we just need to live as one, and it's about humanity versus racism. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dara. Thank you. Let's move on to Hannah. So as a reminder, Hannah is the legal counsel at McDonald's restaurants.
Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Hannah.
Perfect. Well, hello, everybody. Just as Taya said, my name is Hannah Tengnah, and I work as one of the legal counsel for the McDonald's UK market. And I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to speak to you today, because I think we've had a great deal today about, from the panel about the need for change at this time. And so what I wanted to walk you through briefly is a small but beneficial step that I think we can all take in the form of a reverse mentoring scheme. Now, as a company, McDonald's have participated in the more traditional mentoring schemes run by women in hospitality, travel and leisure, as my CEO is a big advocate for diversity, but this is the first year that the reverse mentoring scheme has been running. And so essentially what it does is it allows, sorry, I'm just trying to move my slides forward. There you go. So what it does is it allows individuals who are perhaps in the earlier stages of their career, such as myself, to mentor CEOs, executive members, directors across the industry on the issues, barriers and experiences that are faced by ethnic minority individuals, throughout their careers and moving forwards in their careers. So I was approached to participate in the scheme, and it was a really great opportunity for me to develop and to feed into the discussions really surrounding, diversity within leadership roles. So I went through a really simple application process, and it was a focus on what I could offer the scheme as well as what I was looking to get out of the scheme, so that I could be matched appropriately with my mentee. Now, in terms of our journey so far, myself and my mentee have had 3 mentoring sessions, and we're learning a huge amount as we go. So we set an agenda for each session, just to make sure that we can maximize our time from the outset. And we really established that what we wanted from the relationship from each other and how we could support each other as we move through and grow through the process. And really, to do that, we knew that we needed to build, a strong relationship quite quickly. One where we could talk openly without any fear of retaliation, where we could speak, about, to each other about the challenges and respectfully challenge each other in order for us both to grow, but in different ways. Because at the end of the day, that's the whole purpose of the scheme. We want to learn and we want to share. So this is how we do it. And we adjust the approach as we go. Some of the sessions are focused very heavily on what my mentee needs from the discussion, and sometimes we rebalance and we focus on what I need and advice on how I can develop myself as well within my career. So it really is a two-way benefit. Now, for me particularly, I think that what I'm finding is, unlike the traditional mentoring schemes where typically I would be coached by a senior executive, this is actually really providing me with the opportunity to lead, to drive the discussion, to set the pace and to share my experiences, which I found has actually been a really great process. And what it does is I can share the challenges that I faced, how that drives me and how things can change for the better, and things, you know, how I think that things could be improved in the corporate world. And for me, and those that know me well will know that I don't tend to speak about diversity a huge amount in large groups. So what I found is in a one-to-one environment, I can really have a frank, open, honest discussion in confidence, and it's allowed me to reflect a bit more in terms of my journey and to acknowledge the times where, you know, I've been, you know, impacted or perhaps put down because of my race. And so it gives me a chance to share those so that you know, she can also learn from those and we can impact the strategy going forwards. So for my mentee, I mean, she is fabulous. She is a senior HR executive in the industry, and she's really committed to increasing diversity, particularly at a senior level. So really, she wants to learn more about race and ethnicity to help her educate other employers, you know, to drive the, you know, diversity agenda, and also to act as a role model really across the industry. So she has her own ideas of what she thinks would work well, and so I can provide that sounding board to her and provide alternatives that perhaps, you know, she may not have considered, but ultimately we always find that two heads are better than one, and so we put our heads together and we think of the best approach to kind of help drive the discussion going forwards. Now, I think we've really found that it's been a great opportunity for us as well just to broaden our network, because under normal circumstances, you know, our paths likely would not have crossed, and yet the matching worked really well, and we found that we've got a number of things that we've got in common despite the fact that we are from very different backgrounds. And equally, it's a low time commitment. I think that we're all finding, particularly through this COVID-19 crisis, that everybody is getting busier and busier throughout the days, and everyone, particularly when you're working at home, you're balancing other commitments. And so from a time perspective, this program has been great because we set aside an hour or an hour and a half each month, and so it's easy for us to fit around our other commitments. Now, the burning question, I think, is why now? And I think at a time like this, the world is really focused on the conversation about race and the need for change. And so it's not just about ensuring people aren't held back due to their race in their career. I think it's about supporting people in their current roles and the wider considerations about race, and making sure that it's actually at the forefront of people's minds and it's on the agenda and it's something that is talked about. And I think for me, the critical issue is perhaps the unconscious bias which is bubbling beneath the surface. I think that we all have, regardless of skin color or religion or background or anything else. I think it really is, this is the time that this needs to be addressed. And in all honesty, I think that most people want to do the right thing. And so now's definitely the time to do it, because it's the time to understand more, you know, to help raise the topic, to focus on what you think about now and actually, you know, how things can be changed for the future. But I think what can be difficult is it can be really hard to start that conversation sometimes, because sometimes we're so focused on not causing offense or, you know, not wanting to make a big deal about something that actually we can just end up ignoring it completely. So what we found is with the reverse mentoring that it's been a great learning process for the both of us, and it's showing that, you know, interest and showing up and being willing to step out of your comfort zone, and as a senior leader to take, you know, considerations on board and use what you hear in these sessions to help develop your strategy. You know, keep that in the back of your mind. And really, for, you know, equally for those who might be in my position, for example, you know, you will have so many experiences that you could share, and actually now that I'm starting to share more of them, I'm seeing a real benefit in doing it. So I really would encourage anybody else to join and to participate, really. Now, we decided to create a blog. So here is myself and Taya, who is my mentee. So we've started a blog on LinkedIn of our journey. And so we just thought it would be a great idea to showcase some of the topics that we talk about, and also, you know, just showcase our journey and how we develop and how we grow through the process, really. So if you're interested, then please feel free to look it up. I'm sure we can circulate a link after this session, and really just thanks for taking the time to listen today. I'll pass back to Taya for any questions, and feel free to ask any that you have.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and thank you for all of the lovely words that you have
all true.
You have used to describe me and to describe you know, our relationship, which has been fantastic. You know, I really love your thought about our paths will have not crossed without this, and that's you know, that's absolutely right. You know, who knows, you know, we would have probably never never met, and the value of the conversations that we have is certainly mutual. You know, I'm getting so much out of you know, those conversations. So thank you for sharing you know, your experience with everybody here on the webinar. Now, I know that there have been a few questions being asked. I will kick things off with a couple of things. The first one is, and Hannah has touched upon that, and also I know that Sandra and I have had a conversation like this in the past. One of the big things, I think, that, you know, if you put aside the you know, people who have who are racist, you know, if you put that aside and you just focus on, you know, those who are trying to do the right thing, people who are trying to be inclusive, but are frankly worried about using the wrong language, you know, saying the wrong thing. You know, they don't mean to offend, but, you know, they just, sometimes the word BAME offends some people. I don't want to be called BAME, or I don't identify myself as BAME. And so there is a lot in terms of how, you know, people who want to get this right, but just don't want to get it wrong. Is there anything that you can say, you know, from your personal perspective, in terms of words of, you know, kind of wisdom or encouragement to those who are trying to get it right?
Okay, so let me encourage people here. So I told you I did the big survey. So we did the big survey on the Race at Work Charter. And one of the questions we asked, and, you know, 24,000 people, we said to all the BAME people, what do you want, what terminology do you like? And, you know, we put out ethnic minority, BME, BAME, there's even one called BAMER. I laughed every time I think about it. People of colour. And what came back was 1 in 3 people said they didn't like any of those. And no, they actually said they don't mind. They don't really care. People are like, you know, that's only needed if you're going to speak publicly about it. But actually, once you start talking to people, you can just call them by their name. So I think the big thing, and in the booklet that I wrote, Let's Talk About Race, I do set out the evidence that actually, if you really want a pecking order then, as to what did people pick, ethnic minority was first, BAME was second, so that's BAME, and people say that I can't be bothered because it's so long. BAME is easier, that's why I say that, rather than try to kind of spell out all the letters every time. BME was third, and people of colour was actually a poor fourth. So what I'm saying, and then there was another third of people who were saying, I don't really like any of those terminologies at all. So I think there is something about how questions are asked, and there's a genuine trying to understand as far as understanding the concept. And one of the biggest challenges people have been scared to use is the word black. But actually what's happened with George Floyd, you know what, you know, it's like, get over it. And based on our feedback, it was, I think, 38%, 37%, 38% of people said that they're not comfortable talking about race. And even when we de-aggregated that by ethnicity group, it wasn't just white people, it was white, black, you know, from all the different census categories, having a degree of, you know, not being comfortable and saying their employers aren't comfortable. So I think it's understanding that as a case in point and then just moving past it so we can kind of get over it. Let's look at the data and start talking about it together. So just, you know, leave that one at the door, because that's only needed for writing about it or talking publicly. Other than that, we can just call each other by our first names if we're on those good terms, and start to talk about what we need to do.
Thank you. There is one question from one of the attendees. As a leader, so how can each one of us as individuals make a difference, and what will that be? It takes just one for a positive change, as they say. So leaders, we've talked about the role of leaders and importance of senior executives making a public commitment. So what is, as individuals, that we can do? Any thoughts from any of the panelists?
I can speak to this. I would say over the past few weeks, what I found really powerful is individuals in my friendship circle and in my professional circle who are white actually asking me, Patrice, but I know you've spoken out about this on LinkedIn and you are quite open to having conversations. tell me what I can do to help a little bit more. How can I increase my understanding? And what do you think I could be doing different? Now, I'm not the font of all knowledge. I don't know everything. And I think there are a lot of kind of Black individuals right now who are being asked these questions and being expected to answer with all the answers. I don't have all the answers, but actually I think it takes a certain degree of bravery for people to actually ask because they care. And it's really important for us to not discourage that, because that's really important. So I particularly think for individuals like friendships and people in organizations, if they really care about what they can do differently, it's going to be maybe a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow once they understand the information, they get a bit deep into it. But actually don't just take that information, be an ally. And by that, I mean, actually speak out when you see that something is wrong or something that is discriminating. And I think, you know, silence is in effect an act. So if you choose to not say something when you see something that's not right going on, you're making a conscious decision not to do something. And I think when it comes to racism or things with a certain undertone, often that's what happens. People don't say anything because it's maybe a little bit uncomfortable. So I would say to those leaders, you know, when you see something that is not right, you need to speak out about it. And if someone talks to you about something that's not right, don't put it down to that individual being a bit sensitive about it, but actually take it upon yourself to investigate it a bit more and make a stand against it.
Thank you. There is a lot on social media about this point around education and whether it is a responsibility of people from ethnic minorities to educate others, or whether it is each one of us has a responsibility to educate ourselves. And, you know, are there any thoughts on that from anybody?
Can I say, I mean, I've heard about the debate on, you know, whose responsibility it is. What it is, I understand both sides. So people are like, why are we explaining? This has been going on for 1,000 years. We've been going on, you know. So for example, we've seen the current disruptions, but then I'm so glad that actually the media have been showing clips of, you know, the NFL people guys kneeling down. That was happening years ago and nobody listened. And I knew about that Colton statue that they threw in the water. I knew the petition existed and Cecil Rhodes. I've heard about these things for years. So there's an element of people feeling, I'm already tired, you know, I'm living this. We've been quietly protesting for years and no one's paid attention. So it's that element, do I have to kind of relive everything again? And one of the things we're actually going to put together is a kind of a reading and video list to say, have a look at these clips, have a look at this reading list, you know, to get informed. And then have the conversation, because it is that element of, you know, that's the best way I can think about how can we manage both sides. So I'm not of the group to say, you know, all sort yourselves out. I'm happy to put something together and we're going to do that ASAP. We're working on it right now. At least people know where to start. And there's some great little video clips as well that sometimes depend on, because people learn and receive information in different ways. So I think, you know, that element, and as I say, conversation is really important to start that discussion. So, you know, on both sides, I do get where people are like, I don't, you know, because actually also it's quite painful to have to remember and bring up all the stuff from the past that invariably starts to happen when you start discussing these things. And I say that as an optimist. I am an optimist, you know, that's why the role I do. But in my lived experience, it's in there, and I don't necessarily want to, you know, dredge it all up again. So I can understand why people are like, inform yourself. I don't want to be the one to tell you. So I think it's about being sensitive to that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Can I just add on to that, Tia? I was speaking to one of my friends yesterday, and she said she felt a little bit overwhelmed because there was so much information out there. Where do you start? Because there's a lot of stuff online, you know, you can read a million, that there's just so much out there, especially at the moment. It's a little bit of information overload. And there's a lot of fact versus opinion. And I think with these matters, how I managed to like not desensitize, but kind of step away from it a bit so it's less emotional for me, is to talk about and share more stats and facts. And there are so many studies that are done on this particular topic, which are quite unbiased, shall we say, but more factual. And I think if individuals are really interested in just finding out some of those root issues, then go to those Harvard Business Review articles or Harvard University, where they have a plethora of research articles that you can read that are not, I wouldn't say too heavy, but actually very factual. And I think when it comes down to facts, you can understand why people feel like a certain way. And I think that's where you can kind of separate some of the emotion from the fact, would help people as they kind of really try to understand not just one person's point of view and opinion, but actually what the underlying root is.
Mm-hmm. On a practical level, one of the things I thought that we should be doing is to put together some resources for our industry in particular, or things, video clips, as Sandra has mentioned, fact sheets, or books to read. I know that, Sandra, you have done quite a bit in terms of putting together lots of information and tips and guidance so that we can bring.
And the Race at Work survey, the reason why we did it, it's UK based, it's statistically valid. There's a sample in there that you can trust the content. It is by census category, so it does deaggregate, so it doesn't lump everything together, because actually the lived experience is not the same. So there's a need to really understand. And the reason why we did the survey was to be able to get this out of the emotional bucket to say, well, let's look at the numbers and start there. Yeah. So, that's why I originally did the survey, because I thought we need some robust, and even the brief to YouGov was like, if it's not statistically valid, I don't want to see it. I don't want to report against it. I only want what I can stand by. And what we're finding is spot on. We look at the insight and then craft the advice or create programs based on what the evidence tells us, they work or they're received, because it helps us to really be insightful and understand what is the lived experience by different groups in the workplace, and how can we support them to have a better experience, and support employers to kind of break down the barriers.
Okay, thank you. There are a few questions on the reverse mentoring program, Hannah. So clearly your presentation has resonated with a few people. Some people have said, is it open for registration? Can we get on it, which is a fantastic. And that's one of the things in my final call to action. I will mention that, yes, we are open to take on more people who might be interested to be part of the reverse mentoring program. And is it open to UK only or UK based only companies? This is an anonymous attendee. I want to know where you are and who you are, because we do virtual mentoring, we can get people from different parts of the world. So apparently people from the US, could they be considered to be mentors or mentees? Absolutely, get in touch, and we would love to have you participating in the program. One question perhaps, for Hannah, just, the insight from an organizational perspective. I know that you and I have talked about, the blog and the fact that you shared the fact that you've been part of this within the organization. Maybe you just want to share some of the conversations you have had with colleagues within McDonald's about the program.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's been such a great journey, actually, because I hadn't spoken to a huge amount of people about it when we first started. And then there was a note that was sent out internally, and actually had so many people reach out to me who were just really interested to learn, what is it that you're doing and how is it a benefit? And actually it gave me the opportunity to really showcase, I guess, some of the discussions that, we've had and what we're learning as we kind of develop our way through. And actually, the feedback that I've been getting is that it's just such a great initiative to have, because it's not something typically, we've heard of the traditional sort of normal mentoring relationships, and actually that in itself has its own set of benefits, as Dara has already gone through. But this, I guess, is just that extra step further. And really, for me, I think I'm really finding that it's helping me, in so many different ways, but particularly to really drive a discussion. I think usually when you can go into these things and you sit and you absorb and you learn lots, but actually it's more of a two-way learning process with the discussions that we've been having. And so yeah, I think it's been a huge benefit, and lots of people that were saying they'd love to participate in something similar. So I think that just is a true reflection of how good it can be.
Excellent, thank you. Dara, do you want to comment a little bit from your perspective in terms of the mentoring and you mentioned you have identified a mentor in your organization, and just to share with the audience how you went about securing the support of a mentor from within the organization.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a mentor. I've always had mentors in my career. And one thing is that for all of my mentors, I've actually worked to them myself. I walked to them and I say, I'd like you to be my mentor. And one thing I would say about that is, if they don't know what I stand for, if they've never seen anything about me, it's going to be difficult for them to accept me as a mentor to start with. So I think as member of the BAME community, we need to be sure that so for instance, if I have been known in an organization to not to align to the culture of the organization, not to have the values of the organization, and then I've lost a lot of brownie points in the organization, and all of a sudden I go to someone and I say, I want you to be my mentor, they are going to be hesitant, in my opinion, because they're going to be thinking, hang on, what exactly do you want? Do you want me to mentor you on the fact that to improve your attitude or to develop your career? Because they are two different things. So we always say we need to make sure that we have emotional intelligence, and that has really helped me a lot in terms of talking to my mentor to find them. And none of them have ever said no. So fingers crossed, everyone I've been to, they've always said yes. And one thing I believe would have happened is that they must have spoken. I don't know, right or wrong. I don't know if it's true or not, but I would assume that if they don't know me very well, they'll probably speak to my manager. And that's why it's also important that we have a very vital relationship, a very good relationship with our managers. Because sometimes people can go, I don't care, who is my manager, all those things. I mean, it takes two. I always say that. So mentor has helped me. They've helped me to develop, and they've given me vital feedback. They've always said to me, they've never been afraid to tell me what I'm not doing right. And I've always been afraid to accept it and improve on it. So that has really helped me. And then I'm just going to wrap this up by referring to the question that was raised earlier on about what can people do to help with racism. I'm just going to say, dealing with racism is everybody's responsibility. The same way I, as a man, I stand for women in business and in leadership. And when I see anyone that is trying to do something that I don't think is fair to gender or to women, I will stand up and I will challenge it. And I think irrespective of our race, we need to challenge racism, and that's the way I will end this.
Yes, so can I jump in here? Because I've got a script and I've looked at some of the questions, and there's some tough ones in there, and I just want to pick up a few of them. So
yes, please.
Is about somebody saying, I'm not BAME, and we know that disparities exist if you come from a lower socioeconomic background. We know they exist on age and gender. And what I say, this is absolutely about all of us. Why the focus is on Black lives right now is because of what's happened, that we've seen people being killed and shut in their beds and all of that stuff. And all we're saying is, while that is an issue, can we look at that? So it's not about, it's going to be like this forever to the exclusion of all others. It's, can that be included as well? So I think that message around inclusion is really important. Somebody talked about raising the issue with their line manager and feel like they're facing a backlash. The key thing I would say here is ask to talk to the line manager, to sit down and try and understand and say, this is what you are perceiving from the behavior, and check, is that right? And what has happened, and talk it through. And I'm talking as somebody who's been here a few times in my career where I just think, I don't think they like me, or, sometimes actually they did something and I thought, no, they definitely don't like me. But by sitting down and working it through, we're now BFFs, hey, you think they're like, no, that's not how I meant it. I'm like, no, that's what I meant. You just work it through, because if you have a line manager, they should want to work with you, because obviously good performance is everyone working together. So I can't just sit down and, play back, while, and do, this is the type of things to do when you're calm, not when you're feeling all kind of emotional about it, but definitely say, this is what I feel because of X, have concrete examples as to why. And then ask them, how do they feel about what you've done? Is there anything that you've done to trigger that? Because it really matters that you diffuse that and, you know, try to work well. And I'm a real big advocate for talking as soon as possible about an issue, not waiting until everyone's got amnesia and we can't remember exactly what happened. You know, do it while it's fresh, because actually more likely to be, oh, sorry, I didn't mean anything by that, or what, it's fresh, and you don't get, you know, people denying because they can't remember what you were on about. So I just wanted to, those are some of the questions I saw. And then one other one about targets. I'm a big advocate for targets. I think it helps you to keep on track. You can use the data. There is the government Ethnicity Facts and Figures website that allows you to look at data now, so you can set benchmarks and say, right, this is what we're recruiting, this is what the talent pool should look like. I talked about downsizing, this is what the new organization demographic should look like. So I'm a big advocate of targets, getting a dashboard together, a group to review it, and all sorts of things that will enable that to come to life.
Can I jump in as well, I think, off the back of that, Sandra, because I think that I think that you're so right. I think that those discussions can be so hard to have. And actually, I think what it comes down to is a confidence thing. And also from my perspective, you know, there might have been issues that have come up and I've just kind of taken them on board, and, you know, I've maybe used them to drive myself, and, you know, something's happened and I think, okay, so that's going to be something that drives me to do better, to, you know, to do whatever I need to do. But I don't take the time to really stop and actually maybe challenge that, you know, in a constructive way. And actually, I think that's something that I've been finding a lot more through the mentoring scheme, is that I'm looking back, and now I start to look back at things, you think, oh, actually, there's so many examples of, you know, times where perhaps, you know, I've been put down slightly, or, you know, comments have been made, or whatever it might be. And I think it's so easy just to keep moving forwards and not make a big deal out of things. But actually, I think you're totally right that, you know, being able to have that discussion at the time that it comes up, and not at a time particularly when you're emotional or anything like that, I totally agree. But just that in itself is, I think, a big education piece, because then, you know, perhaps something was said and actually it wasn't meant in a way that was, you know, meant to cause any offense at all. And actually, when someone realizes that, you know, maybe that's how it's been perceived, then actually, well, then it's a learning for somebody at, you know, that next time to maybe, you know, change the phrasing or just think again. And actually, that's where you'll start to see the change come, you know, slowly but surely over the years, because it's not an overnight, you know, this is not an overnight fix, but ultimately it's having the confidence to have those discussions. And I think as well, you know, we all know that when you're having a discussion with someone, probably 90% of, you know, the conversation is not down to what's coming out of your mouth. It's down to your body language, you know, your tone and all the rest of that. So I would say use that when you're having those discussions, and actually you can read a lot from where somebody is coming from at that time in terms of what their intentions are. And I think that in itself will help to aid the conversation.
And I would just echo at this point, Dara, in his presentation, talked about feedback. And that's that bit about being willing to receive. So that was one of the things I used to struggle with. Don't want to hear it. You know, it's like, what's the matter with you? You know, I'm trying my best, I'm perfect, which I had to get over and realize that actually people might have a point. So actually, it's listening to the hard feedback as well, reflecting on it, thinking maybe have they got a point, and remember it's their perception. So if they're saying your behavior is making them feel in a certain way, then, and that's not what you're trying to do, it's for you to examine that. So I think, you know, that feedback all around is a very positive thing to engage with, giving it and receiving it.
I think it definitely is.
Yeah, can I just add, thank you very much, Sandra and Hannah, and I totally agree with everything both of you said, although I will challenge a line around the BAME. Now, I am BAME 100%. However, if we have some people that don't want to be identified as BAME, and they say they prefer to be identified as Black, we need to remember, we have said we need to learn, we need to listen, we need to act. So while I want to be BAME, and I am BAME, we need to listen to them. We need to find out, why do you think you're Black and not BAME? Is there a middle ground? And I think a lot of reflection and listening needs to happen here. I have seen a lot of people that have said they are not BAME. And I've asked questions why, and I'm collating some of their whys. But for me, I am BAME through and through.
Yeah, and I'm saying that I'm saying one in three people don't really care, and the other third don't like any of the terminology. So I'm actually very relaxed. I'm like, let's not get bogged down there. Let's get to the action.
Yes.
It's an element of hello. Once we get past that, you can call me Sandra, I can call you Dara, Tia. Let's just get past that bit. And when we are looking at data, I'm for Black, Pakistani, Bangladeshi. I'm up for census categories because that's where the data is collected and you can benchmark against that. So from a real clear kind of action plan, let's work together, approach. So I don't really, I'm not fussy about that at all.
It is interesting. There is a question, that's been asked, what is actually BAME? Because, it's not the first time that we have a conversation like this.
I know, and that's what I'm saying. One size doesn't fit all at all. It's just the terminology to talk about a collective who are non-white. So pick, it doesn't really matter. And
so for those who don't know what BAME stands for, it is Black, Asian and minority ethnic. And it's it's become part of the jargon. Perhaps some people who are in different locations are not familiar with. Couple of points, and I'll come to a question that has been asked. We conducted some research into ethnicity, race and ethnicity, and we talked about data, with Patrice and Sandra, the business case and all of that, and we wanted to see from a hospitality, travel and leisure perspective, what do the numbers look like? We've talked about targets and where are we? And at board level, we've got 6.4% BAME representation. At executive committee level, we have that drops from 6.4 to 3.4%, and direct reports, that is a 4.8% against a working age population of 12.5%. So, we've got quite a long way to go in terms of achieving a representation that is reflective of the working age population. A couple of other statistics interesting from our industry standpoint. More than 40% of hospitality, travel and leisure businesses have a no BAME representation at all amongst their direct reports, which is the largest group of kind of executives. And almost twice as many companies have a no BAME leaders on their executive committee. There is a big gap between companies that have a greater ethnic diversity and those that don't. And 82.5% of companies have a no BAME leaders at all. So these are quite some significant numbers that we need to act on. Now, if we bring this conversation against, that's the picture as in our report that we published in February this year. And if we look at now, COVID-19, and it has been mentioned, this is not the time to press the pause button on diversity and inclusion. It's not the time to cut down on budgets that support diversity and inclusion. There is an interesting question from Sue. I'm going to scroll up and find. So the reality is that many businesses, we know hospitality, travel and leisure has been hit really hard by the pandemic. And businesses are struggling to plan for the new world with immense challenges that leadership teams are trying to work through. What is the advice that the panel has to help us collectively try to get this onto the agenda within our companies? We talked about the business case, and we talked about I feel we've got a burning platform now, and sometimes that's what you need to get people and companies to get into action. But any words of wisdom from any of you in terms of how do we bring this up to the top of the agenda when we know now it's just such a difficult period of time that we are living through?
I think just touching.
Sorry.
Just touching on what you just said, Tia, this is the burning platform, and I believe it's really the time as a catalyst for change. So I think historically people could have said, racism doesn't exist anymore, or it's not really that bad. I think the events over the past few weeks have really pushed it to the forefront of the agenda. So if it's not a time for us to be comfortable in pushing this agenda in our organisations now, then it will never be. I think starting off with the business case piece and around some of the stats that you just shared on the survey that you did in February, I think those are really strong starting points for kind of HR individuals or anyone who wants to be an ally to this movement should start with. I think also touching on the fact that in all these businesses, we'll be downsizing now. So it's a balance between the fact that recruitment will be much slower or if not frozen, versus the talent that you already have in-house, and you probably already have a D&I policy, but how do you enact it? How do you maximize it? So it's around both really making sure it's at the top of the agenda, looking at your recruitment profile, but bearing in mind that that's going to be very slow now, but then really harvesting and harnessing what you already have in-house.
Sandra, you wanted to comment.
Yeah, I was going to say, so, I mean, Patrice said a number of things. So the bit I would emphasize, of course, I would say, if ever there was a time to sign the Race at Work Charter, this would be it. It gets the conversation at the top table. It gives you a through line to continue that conversation. And also, and one of the things, the pushbacks you might get if you try and say, oh, but our data's not okay, we can start, make a start to capture the data, because if you didn't have the data, you wouldn't even be able to share that report. So what it does, and it enables an organisation to go forward based on evidence. And although I think with everything, of course, we had Brexit, then we had the pandemic or whatever, ethnicity and pay reporting will be coming down the pipeline, because I'm going to make sure, I mean, I'm in strong relationship with Bays and the ministers there, and I expect it to continue. It's just got, you know, obviously with everything, but even more so now, I think that's going to come forward. So this is about starting to prepare now, using evidence and insights, so that rather than just scattergunning everything and then being disappointed when things don't work, you can actually concentrate and say, right, where do we need to do some interventions? What can we do? And then you can track progress and hopefully do some celebrations when you get some increase and improvement, and at least know where to target resources if you think this is still not moving. What shall we do? So those are the bits that I'd really add to Patrice, I think, who set out some really important points.
What about, we've not really touched on employee resource groups. You know, they're very popular in the US. We know that some companies based in Europe have started looking into creating employee resource groups. You know, some are more structured than others. Some I know have got budgets, they've got a whole governance piece around them, while others are just purely based on employees are coming together and talking about what their needs are, what their expectations are, and what they would like to see in their workplace. Do you think that those groups are effective? Do you think that that is the appropriate way to go in terms of trying to lift up the issues, and to that point that we've talked about listening to what people are saying and acting on that? Is that the right approach for organizations?
Yeah. I mean, can I say, so the approach that I always say is that you need to find a way to listen to your staff from diverse backgrounds. So find a way. If it's not a network, it would maybe be an advisory group or some focus groups. Use the evidence maybe from employee surveys, find out what they're saying as the reasons to kind of start the discussions in the first place. And I think the networks we know that work best, and these are quite popular among many of the big corporates, most of them have cultural diversity or ethnicity networks. The ones that work best have got a good relationship with the HR, D&I, and the network lead, working together, looking at if it's a policy-making department, giving them a chance to comment and give insight on policies that are coming down the pipeline, or in the private sector, sometimes it's about what are the issues, again, looking at the data, what does it tell us about where representation may need specific interventions or a lack of any diversity in our pipeline. And it's those bits of, you know, particular kind of areas of focus where you can get the insight, but what matters is that you find a way to listen. As I say, one way to listen is if you did surveys by ethnicity kind of breakdown, you could actually deaggregate and see what the results tell you. That's one way you could listen. But then even when you did that, it's about how do you then follow that through So it's finding vehicles to listen. And we have some employers where, the networks are really doing really well. And we have lots, we do a masterclass on networks and often over 100 employers there with network leads talking about what can we do to make it more effective. And we also say an effective network has a senior sponsor, so an executive sponsor of the network. So again, that through line to that top table so that the issues can be heard and represented there. And it's a great vehicle also for masterclasses and speakers to inspire people and showcase role models in the organization if you have them inside and out.
There's one comment from Sarah Brooks. Thank you, Sarah. I have worked with employee community groups previously, found them very effective, both from an education piece, networking, promotion of cultural diversity, and support the business with feedback and ideas. All were provided budgets and internal platforms to communicate to the whole business. Thank you, Sarah, for that. There is another question, just going back onto the COVID-19, and we know that from a health perspective, the pandemic has affected the BAME community more than other groups, and whether people have contracted the virus, whether it is people have lost loved ones to the virus. And there is a question there from Mandy about what can we do to support ethnic minorities that have been affected by COVID-19 as we plan the return back to some kind of normality, as we reopen our attractions, as we reopen our restaurants and hotels. So what is the support that can be offered to those groups?
I'm happy to jump in. So I've done a fact sheet on BAME women mental health and the impact of COVID-19, because I know from the government data, that before the pandemic, 29%, for example, of Black women in the UK would report a common mental health disorder in any 1 week. So we know from data that already existed that there were already challenges under the surface. So, and can anybody remember there ever being a campaign on mental health for BAME women? No. So you can think about COVID-19, lockdown, smaller, living in smaller housing, not necessarily having the savings, because if you think about if you're at the bottom of an organization, and what we found in 2008, when we had the economic downturn, 2 years on, 60% of ethnic minority people had no savings at all. So BAME people had no savings, and that was 60%, because the unemployment, if it hits harder. It takes longer to become employed. And this is well-documented data and trends from ONS data and DWP. So employers, the first thing you should encourage your managers to do is check in. Just ask, how are you doing? Is everything okay? What can we do? And the second one is signposting them to resources. So employee assistant programs, or if there are, about areas where they maybe do food banks or resort, some organizations have set up all sorts of different funds, or you may, your headquarter organization, find out what the situation is and at least signpost them to those kind of resources should they need them. But that initial check-in is the first step, and then you listen, and then you take action. And one of the things we're actually encouraging, we did a webinar, and we got Mental Health First Aid England in to talk about what training they did, to just give people some ideas of how to support that, and encouraging employers to get people trained. So you can have people in the organization who can check in, who do know how to help people, who may just need some, and sometimes it's somebody just to talk to. It might not be any action, but just the fact that somebody cares, somebody's checked in, can go a long way as well.
Okay, thank you.
Would totally agree with that. Sorry, I just wanted to add as well. I think that's 100%, I completely agree, because I think for us that we've found, you know, as a company, we're very much a people first company. And I think COVID has affected people in so many different ways, you know, not just people from a, you know, BAME background, but across the board as well. And I think that first, you know, conversation and just that checkpoint and asking, actually, are you okay? Because if you don't ask, you don't know, you know, and everybody has been affected in a different way. You know, some people maybe have been affected financially, other people perhaps are, you know, concerned about maybe going back into work and using public transport, and, you know, everybody has different, you know, some people have children, some people have, you know, clinically vulnerable people that they care for, and so no one situation is the same. And so I think until you actually ask the question and just, you know, check in and actually, how are you doing, you know, and you get that feedback, and then use that feedback to actually start to, you know, plan, okay, well then what adjustments can we make, or what can we do to help, you know, facilitate your return back to work, or to make you more comfortable about returning to work, or whatever it might be. But without that initial discussion, you won't ever know. So I think it can't be a one size fits all approach, but, you know, 100%, you know, ask the question and then use that as, you know, as your support, you know, that you can offer to an individual.
Yeah, I would like to add to that just quickly. I think I can speak for the Black within the BAME community. I think we can do with budget coach. I think that will really help, especially when it comes to financial issues. And personally, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this here, but I'm actually planning on my Instagram page to invite people from Black community for budget coaching, because I know that sometimes this is why people fall into financial pits. It's, again, as you rightly said, Hannah, it's not one size fits all, but I think we don't know what we don't know.
Thank you. Patrice, one last word from you before I wrap up. We've got 1 minute to go.
I think I would just echo everything that everyone has just said. It's a very sensitive time for everybody right now. And I would just say, you know, people who are people managers, there's a great responsibility on us right now to make sure not only that we ask the question, we take the time to listen to our teams, but also we take positive action after we've heard them kind of open their hearts to us, so to speak, because the worst thing for them would be for us to ask them to open the door and not do anything with that information. So, you know, use the networks and report upwards and make, you know, HR or the D&I leads aware of some of the conversations that you've had. You can obviously desensitize it, but if we're holding all that information here, we're not feeding upwards to let the organisation know what could be wider underlying issues within the organisation. So I am also optimistic, Sandra.
Yeah, you have to be.
It's a catalyst, and I'm really, really hopeful that this is going to be what we need to kind of make a change.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. I think an hour and a half has gone really, really quickly. I'm not even going to try and summarize all of the nuggets and gems that you know, everybody has been sharing here, from education is vital, listen, learn, act. You know, the leadership tone has to be from the top. You know, there's just so much. This is the time to address this. I would just like to finish with a quote from former First Lady Michelle Obama. If there is one thing, she says, I have learned in life, it's the power of using your voice. What I would like for everybody to do is, I'm asking you to use your voice. Email, call, speak to your chief executive officer, to your executive leadership, to your board of directors. Ask them to sign, if they haven't done that yet, the Race at Work Charter. The number of companies in our sector that have signed the charter is just so small that it's quite embarrassing even to mention that. I know a few companies have currently, and just before the pandemic, were about to sign the charter, and now they are considering, but please use your voice. If each one of us puts pressure, gentle pressure, asks the question, raises the issue with our leadership teams, we can go a long way. Also, join our reverse mentoring program. It's an opportunity for you to put yourself forward. For those of you, like, you know, Dara has said, you know, he's always looked for a mentor and always try to find a mentor, just join us and we'll match you. Or for those of you who are willing to be reverse mentees, also join us, let us know. I would like to thank our fantastic panelists today for such an engaging discussion. All of you who have joined us for being with us, for giving us feedback, for asking questions, and for supporting us. Stay safe, stay healthy. Follow WHTL, please, on LinkedIn. I love when we get more followers on social media. And I hope to see all of you very, very soon. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.